The gunshot echoed through the dusty main street of Quartz Hill, Colorado, as Penelope Norton clutched her bleeding arm and ran for her life. The year was 1875, and she had just escaped the clutches of Jasper Reed, the richest and most dangerous man in the territory. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she ducked between buildings, the sound of hoofbeats growing louder behind her. She had been running for 3 days now, and Quartz Hill was supposed to be her sanctuary, not another trap. "There she is," a gruff voice shouted. "Get her." "Mr. Reed wants his property back." Property. The word made her stomach turn. Penelope had never belonged to anyone, not even when her father had lost his ranch in a poker game and handed her over to Reed as collateral. She would rather die than return to that man's estate. As she rounded the corner of the livery stable, she collided with a solid wall of muscle. Strong hands steadied her, and she found herself looking up into the most striking blue eyes she had ever seen. The tall cowboy assessed her quickly, taking in her disheveled appearance and the bloodstains spreading across her sleeve. "Please," she whispered, desperation in her voice. "They're after me." The stranger's expression hardened as he heard the approaching riders. In one fluid motion, he pulled her behind him, positioning himself between Penelope and the 3 men who had just ridden up, dust billowing from their horses' hooves. "Xavier Lawson," the lead pursuer acknowledged with a sneer. "Step aside. That woman belongs to Jasper Reed." Xavier's posture remained relaxed, but Penelope could sense the tension coiling within him. His hand hovered near the revolver at his hip, and when he spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. "She belongs to no one but herself." The 3 men exchanged uneasy glances. Xavier Lawson's reputation preceded him. A former Union soldier turned bounty hunter, he was known for his deadly accuracy and unwavering principles. "Reed paid good money for her," the lead man insisted, though with less conviction. "I don't care if he bought the whole damn territory," Xavier replied evenly. "No human being can own another. Now turn around and ride back to Reed. Tell him if he wants to discuss this further, I'll be happy to oblige." For a tense moment, Penelope thought they might draw on him. Then the leader spat in the dirt and reluctantly gestured to his companions. "This ain't over, Lawson." As they rode away, Penelope's legs finally gave out. Xavier caught her before she hit the ground, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man so formidable. "You're safe now, miss," he said, examining her wound with a frown. "That needs tending. I'm staying at the boarding house just up the street." "Why did you help me?" Penelope asked, her voice barely audible. Xavier's expression softened slightly. "Because no one should ever claim to own another person. Not in this country. Not anymore." As he led her toward the boarding house, Penelope didn't know whether to feel relief or fear. She had escaped Jasper Reed only to place her trust in another stranger. But something in Xavier Lawson's eyes told her he was different. She just hoped she wasn't making another terrible mistake. The boarding house was a modest 2-story building run by a widow named Mrs. Fletcher, who raised her eyebrows at the sight of Xavier leading a bloodied woman through her front door but asked no questions. She simply directed them to the kitchen and fetched her medical supplies. "What's your name?" Xavier asked as he helped Penelope into a chair. "Penelope Norton," she replied, wincing as she removed her jacket to reveal the bullet graze on her upper arm. "I came from Virginia originally." "That's a long way," he commented, rolling up his sleeves to help Mrs. Fletcher clean the wound. "What brought you to Colorado territory?" Penelope's eyes darkened. "My father's gambling debts. After my mother died, he lost himself in whiskey and cards. Eventually, he lost our ranch to Jasper Reed." Her voice broke. "When he couldn't pay, he offered me instead." Xavier's jaw tightened, and Reed accepted. "Reed collects things," Penelope said bitterly. "Land, livestock people, especially women. He has 3 others at his estate who came to him through similar circumstances. They're so broken they don't even try to leave anymore, Mrs. Fletcher made a disapproving sound as she applied iodine to Penelope's wound. "That man is the devil himself, owns half the businesses in the county and has the sheriff in his pocket." "Not Sheriff Daniels in Quartz Hill," Xavier corrected. "He's one of the few honest lawmen left in these parts." "Is that why you're here?" Penelope asked. "For the sheriff," Xavier nodded. I'm delivering a prisoner tomorrow, then I'm headed north. Hope flared in Penelope's chest. North meant away from Reed's territory. If she could convince Xavier to take her with him, she might truly escape. There, Mrs. Fletcher said, tying off a bandage around Penelope's arm. You'll live, child. Now you both need food and rest. After a simple but filling meal of stew and cornbread, Mrs. Fletcher showed Penelope to a small room with a bed and wash basin. The luxury of privacy and clean water brought tears to her eyes. She had been sleeping rough since her escape, washing in streams and eating whatever she could forage or buy with the few coins she had managed to take. She was just drifting off to sleep when a soft knock at her door startled her. She opened it cautiously to find Xavier standing there, his expression grave. "Reed's men are back," he said quietly. "6 of them this time, asking questions around town. It's not safe for you to stay." Penelope's heart sank. "Where can I go?" "I have a friend who owns a ranch about 20 miles from here. We can leave at first light. You'll be safe there while I deliver my prisoner to Sheriff Daniels." "Thank you," she said, her voice catching. "I can't repay you, I'm not asking for payment," Xavier interrupted. "Just be ready to ride at dawn, and Miss Norton, try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." As he turned to leave, Penelope caught his arm. "Why are you really helping me, Mr. Lawson? You don't know me." Xavier was silent for a moment. "I've seen what happens when good people stand by and do nothing," he finally said. "I've done enough of that in my life, not anymore." With those cryptic words, he left her to her thoughts. Penelope returned to bed, but sleep eluded her. Who was Xavier Lawson? A bounty hunter with principles seemed a contradiction. Yet there was something in his eyes, a shadow, a sorrow that spoke of a man who had seen too much of the world's cruelty. Dawn came too quickly. Penelope dressed in the clothes Mrs. Fletcher had found for her, a simple skirt and blouse that were a bit too large but clean. She had just finished pinning up her dark hair when Xavier knocked again. "Ready?" he asked, his eyes taking in her transformation from the desperate fugitive of the previous day. "As I'll ever be," she replied with more confidence than she felt. They slipped out the back door of the boarding house where 2 horses waited, Xavier's sturdy black gelding and a smaller bay mare. "Can you ride?" Xavier asked as he secured her small bundle to the saddle. Penelope nodded. "I grew up on a ranch, remember? I can ride, shoot, and mend fences with the best of them." A ghost of a smile touched Xavier's lips. "Good, we're taking the back trails. It'll be slower but safer." They rode in silence for the first few miles, keeping to the cover of trees and ravines. Xavier remained vigilant, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Penelope used the time to study him more closely. He was perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin and the lean, hard build of a man who lived in the saddle. His dark hair was overdue for a cut, and a scar bisected his left eyebrow. But it was his eyes that drew her attention, blue as a summer sky but holding a winter's worth of sorrow. "You're staring, Miss Norton," he said without looking at her. Penelope felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was wondering what makes a man become a bounty hunter." Xavier was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "War," he finally said. "It changes what you're good at, what you're willing to do." "You fought for the Union," he nodded. "Infantry from 62 to 65. "My brother died at Chancellorsville," Penelope said softly, "fighting for the Confederacy." Xavier finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry for your loss." "I'm sorry for all of it," she replied. "So much death, and for what? Men still treat other humans like property." "Some things don't change overnight," Xavier said. "But they do change. Sometimes you have to help them along." They stopped at midday by a stream to rest the horses and eat the provisions Mrs. Fletcher had packed for them: bread, cheese, and dried apple slices. Xavier seemed more relaxed away from town, and Penelope ventured to ask him more about himself. "Do you have family somewhere, Mr. Lawson?" "Xavier," he corrected. "And no, not anymore. My parents died before the war and my brother during it. So you're alone like me." His eyes met hers. "Everyone's alone, Penelope. Some just hide it better than others." The way he said her name sent an unexpected shiver through her. To cover her reaction, she asked, "This friend we're going to, will they really be willing to help me?" "Samuel Thornton owes me his life," Xavier replied. "And he's a good man. He and his wife Clara will give you shelter as long as you need it." "And then what?" Reed won't stop looking for me. Xavier's expression hardened. One problem at a time. First, we get you safely to the Thornton Ranch, then I deliver my prisoner. After that, we'll figure out a more permanent solution. Penelope echoed, surprise evident in her voice. Xavier began packing up their lunch supplies. I don't leave jobs half-finished, Miss Norton. They continued riding through the afternoon, the terrain becoming more rugged as they climbed into the foothills. Penelope's arm throbbed dully, but she refused to complain. Freedom came with pain sometimes. As the sun began to set, Xavier led them into a sheltered ravine. We'll camp here tonight, he said, dismounting and helping Penelope from her horse. There's good water and enough cover if anyone happens by. He efficiently set up a small camp, building a fire in a rock-lined pit that would minimize the visible light. Penelope watched him work, impressed by his methodical approach and self-sufficiency. You've done this before, she observed as he prepared a simple supper of beans and salt pork. Many times, he agreed. The wilderness is often safer than towns when you're tracking or being tracked. After they ate, Xavier checked Penelope's wound, his fingers gentle as he examined the bandage. It's healing clean, he said with approval. No sign of infection. Thanks to your quick action, Penelope replied. I never properly thanked you for standing up to Reed's men. Most wouldn't have bothered. Xavier's expression darkened. Men like Reed count on that, on good people turning a blind eye. You've dealt with his kind before, more than I care to remember. He hesitated, then added, I was married once. Her name was Elizabeth. She was killed by a man who thought he owned her. Penelope's heart constricted. I'm so sorry, Xavier. It was a long time ago, during the war. He stared into the fire. I was deployed. She was working as a nurse. The commander of the hospital took a liking to her. When she refused his advances, Xavier's voice trailed off. By the time I returned, he'd been transferred to another unit. The army wasn't interested in justice for a nurse. So you found him yourself, Penelope guessed. Xavier's eyes, when they met hers, were cold. I did what the law wouldn't. That's when I learned some men only understand one language. The revelation should have frightened her, but instead, Penelope found herself drawing closer to him. And that's why you help women like me. I help because it's right, he said simply. You should get some rest. I'll take first watch. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully to Penelope that night. She kept seeing Jasper Reed's cruel smile, kept feeling his hands on her. She awoke with a start to find Xavier kneeling beside her, concern etching his features. You were crying out, he explained, withdrawing his hand from her shoulder. A nightmare, Penelope nodded, embarrassed. Sorry to disturb you. No need for apologies. We all have our demons. He offered her his canteen. Water. She accepted gratefully, noting that the sky had begun to lighten. Is it time to move on? Soon, Xavier confirmed. We should reach the Thornton Ranch by midday if we make good time. They broke camp efficiently and set out as the first rays of sun crested the eastern mountains. The day promised to be hot, and Penelope was grateful for the wide-brimmed hat Xavier had procured for her. They rode mostly in companionable silence, stopping occasionally to rest the horses and check their back trail. It was during one such stop, as Xavier scanned the horizon with a small brass spyglass, that Penelope noticed his sudden tension. Riders, he said grimly, 3 of them following our trail. Penelope's heart raced. Reed's men, most likely. They're still a few miles back, but they're moving fast. Xavier quickly mounted his horse. We need to push hard for the ranch. The Thorntons have enough hands to discourage unwanted visitors. They rode at a gallop where the terrain allowed, the horses sensing their rider's urgency. Penelope's wound throbbed with every impact, but she gritted her teeth against the pain. The alternative, being returned to Reed, was unthinkable. The Thornton Ranch came into view shortly after noon, a substantial spread nestled in a verdant valley, with a large main house, several outbuildings and corrals filled with horses. As they approached, a man on horseback rode out to meet them, rifle balanced across his saddle. That's far enough, he called, then his expression changed to surprise. Xavier, is that you? It's me, Samuel, Xavier confirmed, raising a hand in greeting. We need shelter and possibly protection. Samuel Thornton was a barrel-chested man in his 40s with a full beard streaked with gray. His suspicious expression melted into a wide smile as he recognized Xavier. "Whatever you need, old friend, come on up to the house. Clara will be beside herself to see you." As they rode toward the main house, Xavier quickly explained their situation. Samuel's expression grew serious as he heard about Jasper Reed and his pursuit of Penelope. "Reed's reputation precedes him," Samuel said darkly. "He's been buying up ranches all through this territory by fair means or foul, but he's never tried anything with us. We're too big and too well armed." He glanced at Penelope. "You'll be safe here, Miss Norton. My wife Clara will see to that while Xavier completes his business." Clara Thornton proved to be as welcoming as her husband, a handsome woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She immediately took Penelope under her wing, providing fresh clothes, a hot bath, and a proper examination of her wound. "Xavier did a fine job cleaning this," she commented as she applied a fresh bandage. "But men never use enough salve. There, that should heal nicely now. Thank you, Mrs. Thornton," Penelope said sincerely. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." "Clara, please," the older woman corrected, "and there's no need for repayment. Any friend of Xavier's is welcome here. He saved Samuel's life during a cattle drive gone wrong flash flood, nearly took half the herd and my husband with it." "He seems to make a habit of saving people," Penelope observed. Clara's eyes twinkled knowingly. "He does at that. Though I've never seen him bring a young woman to our door before. You must be special." Before Penelope could protest, Xavier and Samuel entered the kitchen, deep in conversation. "Reed's men were spotted by one of my hands," Samuel was saying. "3 riders asking questions at the Henderson place about 2 miles east." "I need to get back to town," Xavier said. "My prisoner is scheduled for transfer to Denver tomorrow." Samuel nodded. "Take the South Trail. It's longer but less traveled. I'll have my men redirect Reed's boys if they come nosing around." Xavier turned to Penelope, his expression softening slightly. "You'll be safe here until I return. Should be no more than 2 days." "What if they follow you to town?" Penelope asked, anxiety evident in her voice. "They won't find anything to connect us," Xavier assured her. "And I'm not easy to track when I don't want to be." After a quick meal, Xavier prepared to leave. Penelope walked him to the stable, struggling to find the right words to express her gratitude. "I don't know why fate put you in my path yesterday," she finally said, "but I'm thankful it did." Xavier paused in saddling his horse. "Fate didn't stop Reed's men, I did." His voice softened. "I'll be back, Penelope. We'll figure out a more permanent solution then." "Be careful," she urged, surprising herself by touching his arm. Something flickered in Xavier's eyes, an emotion she couldn't quite name. Then he nodded once, mounted his horse, and rode away without looking back. The 2 days of Xavier's absence stretched into an eternity for Penelope. Despite the Thorntons' hospitality and the ranch's evident security, she couldn't shake the fear that Jasper Reed would find her. Each approaching rider sent her heart racing, and each sunset without Xavier's return deepened her anxiety. Clara, with her motherly intuition, kept Penelope busy helping with household tasks. "Idle hands feed worrying minds," she said firmly as she taught Penelope her secret recipe for sourdough bread. On the evening of the second day, Samuel returned from town with news. "Reed himself has arrived in Quartz Hill," he reported grimly. "He's offering a $500 reward for information leading to your return." Penelope's hands trembled as she set down her teacup. "That's more than most men earn in a year." "It is," Samuel agreed. "But money only buys so much loyalty. The folks around here have no love for Reed or his methods." "Has there been any word from Xavier?" Penelope asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Samuel and Clara exchanged a look. "Nothing specific," Samuel said carefully. "But there was talk of trouble at the jail last night. Some men trying to break out the prisoner Xavier was guarding." Penelope's blood ran cold. "Was anyone hurt?" "Reports vary," Samuel said, "but Xavier Lawson isn't a man easily bested." Despite his reassurance, Penelope barely slept that night. Her dreams were filled with gunfire and pursuit, with Xavier falling and Reed's cruel laugh echoing through the darkness. She woke before dawn, her heart pounding, and knew sleep would not return. The morning passed in a haze of anxiety. Penelope helped Clara with breakfast for the ranch hands. then assisted with laundering bedsheets, anything to keep her mind occupied. By midday, she had taken to sitting on the front porch, ostensibly to shell peas, but really to watch the road. It was late afternoon when she spotted the rider approaching from the south. Even at a distance, she recognized the set of Xavier's shoulders and the distinctive gait of his black gelding. Without thinking, she set aside the peas and ran down the path toward him, heedless of propriety or caution. As she drew closer, she saw that Xavier's shirt was stained with blood, and he rode with one arm held stiffly against his side. His face was drawn with pain, but his eyes lit with something close to warmth when he saw her. "You're hurt," Penelope said, reaching for his horse's bridle. "It's nothing serious," Xavier replied, though his grimace as he dismounted contradicted his words. "Bullet grazed my ribs. Doc Williams in town patched me up." "What happened?" Penelope demanded, supporting his arm as they walked toward the house. "Reed's men tried to free my prisoner," Xavier explained, "then tried to take me. Neither attempt succeeded." By this time, Samuel and 2 ranch hands had joined them. "Let's get you inside," Samuel said, taking Xavier's other side. "Clara will want to check those bandages." Once settled in the Thorntons' parlor with fresh bandages and a glass of whiskey, Xavier provided a more complete account. Reed arranged for his men to create a distraction while others attempted to free the prisoner, a horse thief named Wilkins. "Their real goal was to capture me, hoping I'd lead them to you." "How many were hurt?" Penelope asked, her voice small. "2 of Reed's men won't be causing any more trouble," Xavier said matter-of-factly. "Sheriff Daniels took a bullet in the shoulder, but he'll recover. My prisoner is safely on his way to Denver with the federal marshal." "And Reed," Xavier's expression darkened, "he's still in Quartz Hill making threats and raising the bounty on your head. $1,000 now," Clara gasped. "That's a small fortune." "He's desperate," Xavier said. "And dangerous. We need to consider our next move carefully." "Our," Penelope echoed. Xavier's eyes met hers directly. "I told you I don't leave jobs half-finished. Besides, this has become personal now." A small, selfish part of Penelope was glad to hear it, though she immediately felt guilty for putting Xavier in further danger. "What do you suggest?" "We need to neutralize Reed's claim on you," Xavier said thoughtfully. "The legal basis of his ownership is the gambling debt your father incurred. If we could prove the game was rigged or the debt otherwise invalid." "That won't be easy," Samuel interjected. "Reed is too smart to leave evidence of cheating." "Perhaps," Xavier agreed. "But men like Reed make enemies. Someone in Quartz Hill might know something, might be willing to talk for the right incentive." They discussed possibilities late into the evening, eventually settling on a plan. Xavier would return to town in a few days, once his wound had healed enough for travel. There, he would discreetly investigate Reed's gambling operations while Samuel made inquiries through his business connections. "And what about me?" Penelope asked. "I can't hide here forever, putting the Thorntons at risk." "You'll stay put for now," Xavier said firmly. "Once we have something concrete against Reed, then we can decide next steps." Penelope wanted to argue but recognized the logic in his words. Instead, she focused on helping Xavier recover. Under Clara's guidance, she changed his bandages, prepared healing poultices, and ensured he rested properly. Xavier proved to be a reluctant patient, chafing at an activity, but he submitted to Penelope's care with surprising grace. During those days of convalescence, the barriers between them gradually lowered. Xavier spoke more of his childhood in Pennsylvania, his wartime experiences, his years drifting westward after losing Elizabeth. Penelope shared her own story growing up on a Virginia plantation that had fallen on hard times after the war. Her father's descent into gambling and drinking, her desperate attempts to keep their ranch afloat before Reed entered their lives. "I actually thought he was being generous at first," she admitted one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "He offered my father money to keep the ranch going, invited us to dinner at his estate. I didn't realize until later that he was deliberately encouraging my father's gambling, leading him deeper into debt." Xavier's jaw tightened. "Men like Reed see everyone as either a possession or an obstacle. Your father was a means to an end, and I was the end," Penelope said bitterly. a pretty ornament for his collection. When he told me my father had wagered me in that final game, I couldn't believe it, even when he showed me the paper with my father's signature. Xavier's hand covered hers, warm and steady. Your father's failings don't define you, Penelope. And Reed's claim has no moral validity, whatever paper he holds. She turned her hand to clasp his. Thank you for seeing that when so many others didn't. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feeling. Then Xavier gently withdrew his hand and changed the subject. But something had shifted, a new awareness humming beneath their interactions. A week passed, then 10 days. Xavier's wound healed well enough for light activity, and he began helping around the ranch, seemingly in no hurry to return to town despite their plan. Penelope found herself selfishly grateful for the delay, treasuring these peaceful days of getting to know him better. On the 12th day, a rider arrived from Quartz Hill with news that changed everything. Sheriff Daniels had recovered sufficiently to reopen his investigation into the jailbreak attempt, and he had made a surprising discovery. One of Reed's wounded men had survived and was willing to testify against his employer in exchange for leniency. This could be the break we need, Xavier said as they gathered in the Thorntons' study to discuss this development. If Reed was directly involved in the jailbreak attempt, that's a federal offense. The sheriff wants you both to come to town to make statements, Samuel said, reading from the letter the messenger had brought. He says he can guarantee your safety. Xavier frowned. It's still risky. Reed has a lot of men. But this might be our only chance to bring him down legally, Penelope argued. I'm tired of hiding, Xavier. I want my freedom back. After much debate, they decided to go, but with precautions. Samuel would accompany them with several of his most trusted hands. They would travel under cover of darkness and go directly to the sheriff's office, avoiding public areas where Reed's men might be watching. They set out the following night, a small cavalcade moving silently through the moonlit landscape. Penelope rode close to Xavier, drawing strength from his calm presence. Despite the danger ahead, she felt a strange sense of rightness. For the first time since her mother's death, she wasn't alone in her fight. Quartz Hill was quiet when they arrived in the pre-dawn hours. Most businesses shuttered and the streets empty. Sheriff Daniels met them at the back entrance to the jail, his left arm in a sling but his expression determined. Glad you came, he said, ushering them inside. My deputy's keeping watch out front. Reed's been too quiet lately, makes me nervous. Inside, the sheriff outlined what they had learned from the captured man, a hired gun named Tucker, who had been with Reed for only a few months. Tucker had confirmed that Reed personally ordered the jailbreak attempt and the mission to capture Xavier, offering substantial bonuses for success. More importantly, Daniels continued, Tucker says Reed has been running rigged games for years. He employs professional card sharp to pose as traveling gamblers, working in pairs to clean out targeted marks. Like my father, Penelope said, the pieces falling into place. Exactly, the sheriff nodded. Tucker named names, including the men who worked your father's game. We've already arrested one of them. He's in the cell next door, suddenly very talkative now that Reed has abandoned him. Xavier leaned forward. So you have enough to arrest Reed? For the jailbreak conspiracy, yes. For the gambling fraud, maybe, but his lawyers will fight hard. Daniels looked directly at Penelope. What would help most is the original marker your father signed. Tucker says Reed keeps all such documents in a safe at his house. Which might as well be a fortress, Xavier said grimly. He has at least a dozen men guarding that estate. Not anymore, Daniels replied with satisfaction. Most of his hired guns have scattered since the arrests began. Word is he's down to just a few loyalists and they're nervous. A plan began to take shape. The sheriff would obtain a search warrant based on Tucker's testimony. Xavier, with his experience in tracking and stealth, would accompany the official party to Reed's estate to ensure no evidence disappeared during the search. What about me? Penelope asked. I know the layout of Reed's house. I lived there for 3 weeks before escaping. Xavier immediately objected. It's too dangerous. Reed wants you back more than anything. Which is exactly why I should go, Penelope argued. I'm tired of being hunted, Xavier. I want to face him on my terms with the law behind me. The debate continued until Samuel unexpectedly supported Penelope. "She's right, Xavier. This ends when she reclaims her power from Reed, not when you do it for her." Xavier looked from Samuel to Penelope, his expression conflicted. Finally, he nodded once. "All right. But you stay with me the entire time. No heroics." "I promise," Penelope agreed, relief and determination flooding through her. They spent the day preparing, reviewing the layout of Reed's estate and planning the approach. The sheriff gathered a posse of trusted men, and by nightfall they were ready. The warrant, signed by the circuit judge who had fortuitously arrived in town that afternoon, authorized a thorough search of Reed's property for evidence of gambling, fraud, and conspiracy to commit jailbreak. As they rode toward Reed's estate in the gathering darkness, Penelope fought to control her rising anxiety. The last time she had seen this road, she'd been fleeing for her life. Certain Reed's men would catch her before she reached town. Now she was returning voluntarily, and the irony wasn't lost on her. Xavier rode beside her, his presence a steady anchor. "You can still turn back," he said quietly. "No one would think less of you." Penelope straightened her spine. "I would think less of me. This is my fight too, Xavier." His eyes held hers for a long moment, and something in them made her breath catch. "Yes," he finally said. "It is." Reed's estate came into view, an ostentatious mansion set on a hill overlooking the valley, lights glowing from several windows despite the late hour. The sheriff deployed his men strategically, surrounding the property before approaching the main gate. The guards were clearly surprised by the arrival of a large, armed party led by the sheriff. Their uncertainty increased when Daniels presented the search warrant. "Mr. Reed isn't receiving visitors," one guard insisted, though he looked nervous. "This isn't a social call," Daniels replied coldly. "Step aside or be arrested for obstruction." After a tense standoff, the guards reluctantly opened the gates. As the posse rode through, Xavier positioned himself protectively beside Penelope, his hand never far from his revolver. Jasper Reed met them on the front steps of his mansion, his customary smooth confidence visibly strained. He was a tall man in his 50s, expensively dressed, with cold eyes that widened in shock when he spotted Penelope. "This is outrageous," he blustered. "Sheriff, you've exceeded your authority, and you," his gaze fixed on Penelope with a mixture of rage and possessiveness. "You've caused quite enough trouble, my dear. It's time you return to where you belong." "She belongs to herself," Xavier said quietly, echoing his words from their first meeting. Reed's eyes narrowed as he took in Xavier. "The bounty hunter. I should have had you shot when I had the chance." "You tried," Xavier reminded him. "You failed. Now step aside. We have a legal warrant to search these premises." For a moment, Reed looked like he might refuse. Then, with a tight smile, he stepped back. "By all means, search away. You'll find nothing improper here." The sheriff assigned teams to search different areas of the house. Xavier, Penelope, and Daniels himself headed directly for Reed's study, where Tucker had indicated the safe was located. The study was an impressive room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive desk. Reed followed them in, watching with barely concealed anxiety as Daniels began examining the walls. "If you're looking for a safe, Sheriff, you're wasting your time," Reed said with forced casualness. "I keep my valuables in the bank like any sensible businessman." Penelope, remembering details from her time in the house, moved directly to a large painting of a hunting scene. "It's behind here," she said confidently. "I saw him access it once, though he didn't know I was watching." Reed's face contorted with fury. "You have no right, we have every right," Daniels interrupted, removing the painting to reveal a substantial iron safe. "Now, Mr. Reed, you can open this voluntarily, or I can have the blacksmith from town break it open. Your choice." After a tense standoff, Reed reluctantly moved forward and worked the combination. The safe door swung open to reveal stacks of documents, bundles of cash, and several small jewel boxes. "Those are private business papers," Reed protested as Daniels began removing the contents. "Then you have nothing to worry about," the sheriff replied, sorting through the documents. Xavier stood guard by the door while Penelope helped the sheriff identify relevant items. Her heart raced when she found a folder containing several signed markers, including one with her father's distinctive signature. "This is it," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she handed the paper to Daniels. "This is the document Reed claims gives him ownership of me." The sheriff examined it carefully. "This isn't a legal contract of indenture. It's a gambling marker, nothing more, and if the game was rigged, as our witnesses claim, it's completely invalid." Reed's composure finally cracked. "That woman is my property. I paid good money to settle her father's debts. The law protects property rights. The law doesn't recognize human beings as property anymore, Reed," Xavier said coldly. "The war settled that question." As if on cue, one of the sheriff's deputies appeared at the door. "Sheriff, we found something you should see, in the room behind the kitchen." They followed the deputy through the house to a small, locked room that had been forced open. Inside were three terrified women, the collection Penelope had mentioned to Xavier. They clung to each other, clearly fearful of the armed men who had broken into their prison. Penelope pushed past the men and approached the women gently. "You're safe now," she assured them. "The sheriff is here to help you. Reed can't hurt you anymore." While Penelope calmed the women, Xavier and Daniels confronted Reed, who had followed them to the room. "These women are my employees," Reed insisted, though his face had gone pale. "Locked in a room with no windows?" Daniels asked skeptically. "I think not." "Jasper Reed, you're under arrest for unlawful imprisonment, conspiracy to free a federal prisoner, assault on an officer of the law, and fraud. There may be more charges once these ladies have told their stories." As Daniels read his rights, the man's calculating gaze fixed on Xavier. "You've made a powerful enemy, bounty hunter. I have friends in high places." "So do I," Xavier replied evenly, "and unlike yours, mine aren't for sale." While Reed was secured and taken to the sheriff's wagon, Penelope helped the rescued women gather what few possessions they had. All three had stories similar to her own father's or husband's who had gambled away everything, leaving them as collateral for Reed's generosity. "What will happen to them?" Penelope asked Xavier as they watched the women being guided to waiting horses. "The sheriff's wife will look after them for now," Xavier said. "After that, it depends on what they want. Some may have families to return to. And those who don't," Xavier's expression softened, "then we'll help them find a new start, just like we're doing for you." The journey back to town was subdued. Reed sat silently in the sheriff's wagon, his empire crumbling around him. The rescued women huddled together on borrowed horses, still processing their sudden freedom. Penelope rode beside Xavier, a strange mix of emotions swirling within her: relief, vindication, and an uncertainty about what came next. As they reached the outskirts of Quartz Hill, the first hints of dawn were lighting the eastern sky. Xavier guided his horse closer to Penelope's. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. Penelope considered the question. "Relieved, angry, sad for my father's weakness, grateful that it's over." She met Xavier's gaze. "What happens now, that depends on you," Xavier replied. "The marker your father signed will be invalidated once the rigged gambling is proven. You'll be legally free." "I've been free since the moment I ran," Penelope said firmly. "A piece of paper doesn't change that." Xavier smiled slightly. "No, it doesn't. But it makes your freedom official, gives you back your choices." "And what about you?" Penelope asked, her heart beating faster. "What will you do now?" Xavier was silent for a long moment. "I've been thinking it might be time to settle somewhere. Bounty hunting is a young man's game, and I've seen enough violence to last several lifetimes." Hope bloomed in Penelope's chest. "Where would you settle?" "I don't know yet," he admitted. "Somewhere with good land and decent people. Somewhere I could build something lasting. Alone." The question escaped before Penelope could reconsider it. Xavier's eyes, when they met hers, held a warmth she'd never seen before. "That would depend on whether I had a reason not to be alone." The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and decisions. Reed was held without bail pending his trial, his erstwhile employees eager to testify against him in exchange for immunity. The three women rescued from his estate were gradually reunited with family members or placed in situations where they could rebuild their lives. Penelope found herself at a crossroads. With Reed's claim invalidated, she was truly free to choose her path. Her father's ranch in Virginia was long gone, sold to cover his debts. She had no home to return to, no family left except distant cousins she barely knew. What she did have was a growing certainty about her feelings for Xavier Lawson. During the weeks since he had first stood between her and Reed's men, something profound had developed between them, a connection built on mutual respect, shared values, and increasingly undeniable attraction. Xavier himself seemed to be in no hurry to leave Quartz Hill. He had taken a temporary position assisting Sheriff Daniels, whose injured shoulder still limited his activities. Each evening, he would call on Penelope at the boarding house where she was staying, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book of poetry, a ribboned package of Mrs. Fletcher's butter cookies, once a delicate silver hairpin he claimed suited her. They would walk through town together, talking about everything and nothing, gradually sharing the deeper parts of themselves. Penelope learned that beneath Xavier's stern exterior lay a thoughtful man with a dry wit and a profound sense of justice. He in turn discovered her resilience, her quick intelligence, and her capacity for joy despite all she had endured. 2 weeks after Reed's arrest, Xavier invited Penelope to dinner at the town's best restaurant, an unprecedented formality that set her heart racing. She wore her best dress, a deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes, and spent extra time arranging her dark hair. Xavier was waiting outside the boarding house, looking uncharacteristically nervous in a clean shirt and string tie. His eyes widened appreciatively as Penelope descended the steps. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Penelope smiled, taking his offered arm. "You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Lawson." The restaurant was intimate, with white tablecloths and flickering candles. Xavier had reserved a table in the corner, away from curious eyes. As they settled in, Penelope noticed he seemed preoccupied, almost tense. "Is something wrong?" she asked after they had ordered. Xavier met her gaze directly. "Nothing's wrong, but I do have something important to discuss with you." Penelope's pulse quickened. "I'm listening." "I've made a decision about my future," Xavier began. "I've purchased land about 15 miles northwest of here, good pasture with a creek running through it, enough for a decent-sized cattle operation. There's a small house that needs work, but it's solid, room to build something better eventually." "That sounds wonderful," Penelope said sincerely, though her heart constricted at the thought of him settling so far from town from her. "It could be," Xavier agreed. "But a ranch needs more than one person to make it work." He reached across the table to take her hand. "Penelope, these past weeks have shown me what I've been missing all these years. I never expected to find someone who could make me want a different kind of life, but you have." Penelope hardly dared breathe. "What kind of life, Xavier?" "A shared one," he said simply. "I'm asking if you would consider building that life with me, as my wife." Joy surged through Penelope, so intense it brought tears to her eyes. "I would consider it very favorably," she managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. Xavier's smile transformed his face, erasing years of solitude and sorrow. "Is that a yes?" "It's a definite yes," Penelope confirmed, squeezing his hand. "On one condition." Xavier raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "That we're partners in this venture. Equal partners. I know something about ranching, remember?" "I wouldn't have it any other way," Xavier assured her. "You belong to yourself, Penelope Norton. I'm just asking if you might choose to share that self with me." Penelope stood and moved around the table, heedless of the other diners. Sitting beside Xavier, she took his face in her hands. "I choose you, Xavier Lawson, now and always." Their wedding was a simple affair held at the Thornton Ranch 2 months later. Clara insisted on hosting, declaring her home had brought them together and should therefore witness their union. The guest list included Sheriff Daniels and his wife, Mrs. Fletcher from the boarding house, and several of the townspeople who had stood by them during the confrontation with Reed. Samuel Thornton gave Penelope away, and Clara wept happy tears as the couple exchanged vows beneath a flower-decked arbor in the ranch garden. Xavier, uncharacteristically emotional, stumbled over his vows but recovered with a self-deprecating smile that made Penelope love him all the more. "I promise to remember always that you belong to yourself." he concluded, his voice steady as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. "And I will spend my life being worthy of your choice to share that self with me." Penelope's own vows acknowledged the unusual path that had brought them together. "You stood between me and those who would claim ownership of me, asking nothing in return. In doing so, you showed me what true freedom means: the freedom to choose, to love, to build a life on my own terms. I choose you, Xavier Lawson, freely and completely." As summer turned to fall, they settled into their new home. The small ranch house, though basic, became a warm and welcoming place under Penelope's care. They worked side by side to improve the property, Xavier teaching Penelope about cattle ranching while she introduced innovations from her Virginia background. Word came that Jasper Reed had been convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison. His empire was dismantled, his assets sold to pay restitution to his victims. The 3 women rescued from his estate had all found new beginnings, one reunited with family back east, another married to a shopkeeper in Denver, the third working as a schoolteacher in a growing settlement near Colorado Springs. "Justice doesn't always come," Xavier commented when they received the news, "but when it does, it's sweet." Penelope, curled beside him on the porch swing they had built together, nodded in agreement, "And sometimes it brings unexpected blessings." She took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach, where the first subtle rounding was beginning to show. Xavier's expression shifted from confusion to wonder as understanding dawned. "Are you certain?" "Dr. Williams confirmed it yesterday," Penelope said, her eyes shining. "We'll be 3 by spring." Xavier gathered her close, his joy too profound for words. They sat together as twilight deepened into night, watching the stars emerge over the land that was truly theirs, a place built on freedom, choice, and love that had overcome the darkest of circumstances. 5 years later, the small ranch house had been replaced by a larger, more comfortable home, and the herd had grown substantially. Xavier and Penelope Lawson were known throughout the county as successful ranchers and devoted parents to their 2 children, 4-year-old Elizabeth, named for Xavier's first wife, and 2-year-old Thomas, who had his mother's dark hair and his father's blue eyes. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Xavier always presented Penelope with a single token, a silver locket engraved with the words that had changed both their lives. "She belongs to herself." Inside was a small portrait of their family, the living embodiment of a freedom fought for and won. In the evenings, when the children were asleep and the day's work done, they would often sit together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Those quiet moments held all they had built together: a home, a family, a life anchored in the belief that true love could only exist between equals, between people who recognized and honored each other's fundamental right to self-determination. "Any regrets?" Xavier would sometimes ask, his arm around Penelope's shoulders, and she would always answer the same way, with a smile that still took his breath away. "Only that it took us so long to find each other." In a time and place where many still believed in ownership rather than partnership, Xavier and Penelope Lawson stood as a testament to a different possibility, a future built on mutual respect and freely given love. Their story became something of a local legend, passed down through generations. The tale of a brave woman who refused to be owned, and the cowboy who understood that the greatest love comes not from possession, but from allowing another person the freedom to choose.